Hey all, Doug with D&E in the Garage here. Today I'm coming at you with a podcast because I don't have a lot of work to do. I'm working on a plow setup actually for this Jeep, but I don't have all the parts yet, so there will be a video to come on that. Some more good repair videos, but I got a podcast today about something I've been thinking about. It's a weird topic. So the JL Wrangler was just released, right? The new 2018 next generation of the Wrangler, and you know, predictably, half the segment loves it, half the segment hates it. And one thing's for sure: as soon as they come out with the next generation, everyone will be nostalgic about this one. I mean, everybody hated the JK, and now the JL's out, and everybody's praising the JK. You know, and I don't really have an opinion. Not much of a Wrangler guy. I do tend to like older stuff, so I don't know. If I was going to run a Wrangler, I'd probably try to be a TJ, but the point of this is I've been thinking a lot about, you know, people talk about the Jeep brand isn't what it was, it's more than it was, it's better than it was, it's worse than it was, and where that leaves me thinking is, how did we get here? What series of events led to our brand being what it is today? Because if you look at our beginning, you know what I mean? Or even just 20 years ago, we're so vastly different from what we are today. I dare say Jeep is almost like a luxury brand now. It's crazy, but like, look at the new Grand Cherokee. You know what I mean? That thing is out there competing with Land Rover and Lexus. It's not competing with the Ford Taurus and the Ford Explorer and the Honda CR-V. You know what I mean? People who are buying Grand Cherokees today, new ones, new WK2s, their last car was probably like a Lexus RS or something, you know? And I know somebody specifically who did that. They made that change, and they were like a Lexus person, Lexus specific. And then the Lexus dealership, the Toyota dealership wouldn't make them the right deal, and so they went over to Jeep. And from, you know, I think they've had it for a few months and they liked it. The point is, I've been thinking a lot about our origins. You know, you may remember I've got some other videos on, or another podcast on the history of Jeep, and that plays into this a little bit. If you want to check that out, hit the card up in the corner. The purpose of this podcast and what I want to dig into and really explore is what I'm going to call the golden age of Jeeps. All right, the golden age for our brand, and how it really was the pivotal moment and how it led to where we are today. And I think there's some really neat history in there, and I think that once you understand what was going on in that specific time period, you can understand how we got where we are, and maybe you can understand where we're going in the future. And using the term the golden age of Jeeps for this specific time period, I'm sure is going to be controversial. So before I even tell you what time period I'm talking about, I want to preface with saying this is not the golden age of Jeeps because the models created during that time period were the best ever, all right? There's no possible way to qualify Jeeps like that and Jeep brands. You know, everybody's loyal to something different. It's the golden age of Jeeps because it was the culmination of everything that came before it, and it led to the brand being as large as it is today. Yes, the models that were created during that time had a lot to contribute to that, but I'm not saying that only Jeeps from this time period are good, whatever. Let's get into it. The golden age for Jeeps begins in 1987, definitively. All right? It definitively begins in 1987. Why in 1987? Up until 1987, Jeep was owned by a few different people, most recently the AMC Corporation, American Motor Corporation. And they were struggling, and a couple years before, the European car maker Renault had bought, I think, a controlling stake in AMC. AMC continued to fail, and in 1987, probably a couple years before that, 1986, it began. Renault wants to de-invest of AMC. They want to sell off AMC to try to get out from underneath it. The whole point of Renault getting involved with AMC, and this is very important to our story, the whole point was AMC gets the benefit of a large, successful European automaker to help bolster their sales, and this European company, Renault, gets a foothold in the United States and hopefully ends up selling more cars here. There are a lot of European companies that would love to sell cars in the United States, and only a handful of them do. You know, how many European companies do we have selling over here? We got Mercedes and a couple German ones, 2 British ones, and that's kind of it. Swedish, right? It doesn't matter. The point here was Renault wanted to get cars into here, and AMC was looking to bolster their own sales. So they get into bed with each other. It does not work out, and in 1987, Renault's ready to cash out. Who buys AMC? Lee Iacocca. Why does Lee Iacocca buy AMC? And I've touched on this in other podcasts. Lee Iacocca is a personal hero of mine, and the story of Lee Iacocca acquiring AMC is one of my favorite bedtime stories. It's just such a great tell. Here it is in a nutshell. Lee Iacocca wants AMC because Lee Iacocca wants Jeep. Lee Iacocca wants Jeep because Lee Iacocca has seen AMC's plans for the yet-to-be-released Grand Cherokee. We're talking about 1987. The first Grand Cherokees are released in late 1992. So the public does not know about the Grand Cherokee, but Lee Iacocca does. And he wants the Grand Cherokee as a Chrysler product. He is currently rebuilding Chrysler to its former glory. He's just revolutionized their small car market with the K-car platform to make them competitive with foreign markets, your Camrys and your Civics and stuff. Then I think in 1985 maybe, he released the Dodge Caravan, which was hugely successful, forever revolutionizing soccer pickup. And then he sees the Grand Cherokee, and I don't think it's a stretch to see why he wanted the Grand Cherokee, all right? Put the Grand Cherokee in the same lineup as these Dodge Caravans and the newly popular Dodge Ram trucks. He wanted the Jeep brand. He wanted the Grand Cherokee. He goes out and he gets it. All right. Why is this the beginning of the golden age of Jeeps? Well, Jeeps were in no way in trouble before this time period, per se. I mean, their parent brand was, but Jeep was the only thing selling on AMC. But, and I will back this up, Jeep is something new and so much bigger from that point on. And much more importantly, if Lee Iacocca, if Chrysler did not pick up Jeep, one of two things would have happened. One, obviously, it would have died with AMC, and that would have been it. We would be telling stories about the Jeep brand like we do about Pontiac and AMC and every other American car company that's gone under. Or possibly more detrimental, somebody else could have bought them, all right? Now, somebody else was looking at AMC to pick up Jeep at this time period, GM, all right? Now, nothing against GM, but I think this would have been devastating, all right? Again, nothing against GM. Let's look at what might have happened. Let's do a little alternate history on an alternate timeline. GM picks up Jeep. First of all, you never have ZJs that have the 318 and the 390. You probably have the 4-liter, though who knows if Jeep would have kept it or more likely put in their own 4.3 that they put in the S10s. Not a bad motor, but highly likely. I guess you would have had 350s. Kind of interesting. Maybe you'd have LS Jeeps. But what scares me about the possibility of GM picking up Jeep in 1987 is what happened to GM in 2008. All right? In 2008, GM killed off half of their brands. I don't remember what all of their brands were, but they killed off Hummer, Pontiac, Saturn, and I can't remember what the other one is. Doesn't matter, all right? The big one that scares me is Pontiac. Pontiac is one of the most American, the Firebird, the GTO, you know what I mean? Pontiac is such a huge brand, and granted in recent years, even in 1987, it wasn't selling as well as Jeep was, but if GM could kill off Pontiac just when muscle cars are making a resurgence, that's what always baffled me. Why did Pontiac not put out a reminiscent of the 60s GTO? Why did they put the GTO on that weird Australian platform and make it look like some kind of Civic? I don't know. That's a side note. I believe that a few things would have happened to Jeep if they had gotten bought by GM. First of all, you would have had Jeeps based on like the Chevy Traverse platform, because Chevy is really good at that. Make one platform, put every single badge on it, call it a different car, sell it to everyone. I don't think Jeeps would be as unique. The Wrangler would probably be around. Who knows what would have happened to the Grand Cherokee and the Grand Cherokee line. Any of the new vehicles coming out. I mean, imagine instead of I don't know, like would the Tracker have come into it? Would they have made a Jeep on like the Tracker platform? And also, aside from, I don't think GM would have done cool things with Jeep the way Chrysler did. There seems to me a very good chance that they would have had to kill the brand in 2008. Maybe they do, God knows, even more scary. And I just thought of this. Maybe they take the Wrangler platform and make like a like the Blazer on like the Wrangler platform. Is that possible? I don't know. It's interesting to think about. And if you're a GM guy and a fan of LS and 350s, I guess it's probably an enticing alternate timeline. But to me, it seems scary. I think Jeep has been, as I just described, in a golden age from 1987 until, and the end date is harder to nail down, and I will dig into this more, but it either ends in 2001 or it ends in 2004. And I have an argument to back up both. I'll get to them in a minute. Let's first talk about what other things besides Lee Iacocca acquiring Jeep and making it a Chrysler product happened to allow this to be the golden age of Jeeps. The first thing we need to look at is the lineup, all right? The lineup under Chrysler, and granted, the framework for this was put in place by AMC. We can't necessarily thank Lee Iacocca for anything more than not screwing it up. But nonetheless, whoever designed it, whoever put it in place and got the wheels in motion, during this time period, you have both the YJ and the TJ Wrangler created. Pretty much what you consider to be, you know, by purists, the best 1 and 2 Wranglers. Certainly revolutionizing that brand. I mean, when the Wrangler first came out, people didn't like it. They called it a fake Jeep the way people call the JL and the JK now, all right? People who drove CJ5s and 7s hated the YJ when it came out. It was too wide and it was too low and it was too commercial, but that was a good thing. It needed to be commercial, all right? By the time Jurassic Park comes around in 1996, they're featuring the 93 Sahara, probably one of the most iconic cars of all time. You know what I mean? And that's because it was such a popular car at the time that it made it into the movie. And I submit, other than maybe the Batmobile and the DeLorean from Back to the Future, that red and gray, or red and tan, whatever it is, YJ from Jurassic Park, probably one of the most iconic movie cars of all time, right? I mean, if you see one, if anyone sees one like that in a parking lot, painted sort of kind of like that, you know what it is immediately. It's the Jurassic Park car. You know what I mean? And they put that on a Jeep Wrangler. There's another car from Jurassic Park, all right, the green one. I guess it's in the second one, or maybe it's still, yeah, no, it's in the first one. What kind of car is that? Can you tell me? I'll wait. Some of you probably know, all right? Some of you might have wrongly thought it was an XJ, or a ZJ. Lots of people think it's a Grand Cherokee. It is, in fact, a Ford Explorer, probably the Eddie Bauer edition. Ford guys, you knew that. Some other car guys knew that, but it's not an iconic car. It's a very popular car. It's not iconic like the Wrangler. What else is being sold during that period? Grand Cherokees, all right? Grand Cherokees are huge. Now, you guys can call them lifted minivans all you want, but the fact remains, in this time period, and this is one of the reasons that this time period may extend to 2004, I'll get to that in a minute, Grand Cherokees have solid front axles. They come with the Jeep 4-liter engine, which, say what you want, it's one of the greatest motors of all time. I'm not even going to dig into why. You know why. And if you're a hater, you know why you're a hater. They come with manually selectable transfer cases, all right? Something that Chevy stopped doing in the 90s, Ford stopped doing in the 90s, vacuum buttons and stuff. Nope. Give me a selectable transfer case. Not only that, the transfer cases they have, the 242, the 231, the 241, monster transfer cases, the 247, I guess. So a lot of people like that. I don't know, I like a little more control, but I mean, those are transfer cases that give you shift on the fly transfer cases. That's a really cool thing. All right, Toyota still doesn't have shift on the fly transfer cases. Their 2018 Tacomas don't have shift on the fly. All right, I can shift my WJ, my ZJ, my XJ, my YJ, my TJ, maybe YJ. Did YJ still have locking hubs? Not a Wrangler guy. TJ anyway, on the fly up to like 40, 50 miles an hour, all right? That's huge. That means that you can own one of these Jeeps and just be a weekender. You don't have to be a hardcore off-roader. You don't have to know everything about cars to get in a TJ Wrangler from 1997 and rip around, you know what I mean? And maybe you see a little bit of crazy terrain and you pop your 231 in, you know? That's excellent. Grand Cherokees were real Jeeps there. That's what I was getting at. They equipped them well enough. Who cares what they look like and who cares who bought them, right? If you get your hands on a ZJ or a WJ from 93 to 2004, You can make yourself a rock crawler, you can make yourself a mudder, you can make yourself an all-around weekend warrior like most of us do. They were good Jeeps, and they kept, even though they were unibody, they kept with the spirit of what Jeep was supposed to be. You know what I mean? I'm sitting in a XJ right now. This thing's bone stock. It's a 2000, bone stock, nothing special about it at all. But if I wanted to go and wheel it right now, I get some wheeling done. I got stock tires, but I got the 231 right here. Got a solid front axle. It's built tough, you know what I mean? Of course, that's a good segue into the third vehicle on that lineup that makes it so special. The XJ is one of the most iconic Jeeps ever. No, its doors don't come off. No, its roof doesn't come off. It doesn't need the doors and roof to come off to be awesome, all right? Think about where you were in life in the 90s, whether you were a kid or you were an adult. I guarantee you crossed paths with an XJ at some point. For me, my buddy's mom had an XJ, and then later he got it to drive, and man, we wheeled that thing all over the place. That was probably one of my first introductions to Jeep. Was like his mom would drop him off for a play date in this this red XJ. I think it was a '96. Everybody I know, some mailmen were driving around in XJs. Like, you knew somebody who had a Jeep Cherokee, 2-door, 4-door, from the 80s, not, you know, from later. You knew someone that had an XJ, and that's huge. I mean, think about all the movies XJ's in. It's in the beginning of Goonies, which I've brought up before. That's, I think, probably a paid endorsement for Jeep. But Land of the Lost, they're driving around in an 80-something XJ that never needs gas for some reason. Remember that show? I think the pretense was like an earthquake happened when they were driving around in their XJ, and the ground opened up and the XJ fell in, and underneath our Earth was another planet populated by dinosaurs still, but somehow there was still sun, and they were just trapped down there and they couldn't get home. If they had like an 88 XJ that never needed gas. I mean, there were some holes in the show, but it was a pretty cool show, and it's no mistake that they chose an XJ for that show. After that, there are two other cars that didn't make it through this time period, but certainly helped this be awesome, all right? The Comanche, the MJ, the pickup truck that Jeep made based on the XJ. I think they made it from 85 to 93, 94, something like that. So yes, this time period did kill the Comanche, but dang, that mini truck is cool, all right? I don't know anybody who wouldn't take a Comanche if they could get one cheap. The problem is, they're not good anymore. They're beat to heck, and if they are good, they're not cheap. Like 15 grand, some of the ones around here go for that don't have rust. I almost got a hold of one for 2 grand, like before I bought this thing, and there was nothing left of it. The bed was gone, the frame was rotted out. They are awesome trucks, and they help define our brand. Because I'm gonna say it, it's the coolest mini truck. All right, screw that weird VW truck, and Chevys and Fords are still a little too big. Your Rangers and your S10s. I'm talking about that little Comanche, man. Yeah, give me that thing all day. Another vehicle that needs to be mentioned from this time period, and it's a little difficult to approach, the Wagoneer, all right? They made the Wagoneer from the 60s up to like 92, I think, and the thing is just a tank. It got like, there's probably 20 different motors they put in it over that time. Solid body on frame. The thing is a beast, and yes, it went away in this time period, and that is sad, and I would have liked it to stick around, but side note about the Wagoneer, I think the Wagoneer had to go away, because if it didn't, the Wagoneer would have turned into something that none of us wanted to see. I'm thinking that the late 90s would have turned the Wagoneer into a Ford Taurus wagon type object. All right, Chrysler takes some kind of weird K platform, or maybe even like a, I don't even know what they would do, because it wasn't big, it wasn't tall off the ground, it wasn't really an SUV. It was more closely associated with a station wagon. It's called the Wagoneer. It was the original sport utility vehicle, but it wasn't on par with the SUV. And the Wagoneer and the Grand Cherokee have no reason to exist at the same time on the same line. All right, they're putting 5.9s, 360s in Grand Cherokees. You don't also need the Wagoneer. I love the Wagoneer, and I hated to see it go, but had the Wagoneer stuck around, I think that something awful would have happened to that nameplate. And there's still time. There's still time. It scares me the way Dodge and Chrysler like to take old, awesome nameplates and put them on new vehicles that have nothing to do with what they used to be. I'm looking at you, Dodge Charger. I like the new Chargers, but they have nothing to do with the old Charger. The old Charger was a 2-door car that was famous for running away from the cops. The new car you built is a 4-door cop car. How do you get off calling that a Charger? Has nothing to do, whatever. I see what you did. I see what you did, and you think we're dumb enough to, you just gave it the Charger nameplate and expected we would buy it blindly, and we did. It makes me very angry. The same thing with the Dart. The Dart used to be a cool car. You know what the new Dodge Darts are? They're rental cars. That's like the only reason they exist is so that Dodge has something to offer rental fleets. So yes, I absolutely believe that had the Wagoneer stuck around through this time period, something awful would have happened to it. Like a Dodge Stratus wagon called the Wagoneer or something off. Yeah, I mean, shoot, it's possible. So anyway, Wagoneer goes away, Comanche goes away during this time period. What else makes this time period so awesome? Why is it the golden age of Jeeps? All right, it's the golden age of Jeeps because all of these things helped ingrain our society. Jeep became such a huge brand during this time period. Another one of the things, we talked about the line, all right? The line, I didn't actually say this. What I was getting to was that lineup, XJ, YJ, TJ, ZJ, WJ, all of those vehicles meant that there is a Jeep for everybody. You're young and single and you live near the beach, here's a YJ. You're a soccer mom in the suburbs, here's a ZJ, here's a WJ. You live on a farm, you live on a down a dirt road, here's your XJ, you know what I mean? There's a Jeep for every segment, right? The Grand Cherokees were fancy during this time period. Real fancy. In '93, when the Grand Cherokee debuted, it had a fully computerized EVIC system. I don't even think like Mercedes and Cadillac had that in '93. Granted, didn't work super well, but I don't know anybody that has one that it still works from like the early pre-OBD years, but the point is it worked at the time, I guess. I don't know, I wasn't driving cars in '93. There was a Jeep for every segment, and that led us to where we are today, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. Another thing that helped make this the golden age of Jeeps, and I touched on it before with the transfer cases, the drive lines they were putting in these Jeeps, they're historic, they're monumental, all right? The 4-liter with the AW5, AW4 transmission behind it, automatic transmission with like a 231, that's an iconic bulletproof driveline. 4-liter with 242 and AX4, the manual trans. Forget about it. You know what I mean? Those transmissions, transfer cases are bulletproof. The 4-liter engine is bulletproof. All right. Yes, it's going to leak oil from the time it hits 20,000 miles until the time you run it into a tree or flip it off road at 220,000 miles. Yes, it's going to leak a little bit of oil. And in the winter, your hydraulic lifters are going to tap a little. And no, you can't tighten them. That's just what they do. But that engine is bulletproof. All right. You have to try real hard to kill that thing. Real hard. And even if you do, they still go around. The Jeep that's right next to me, my Grand Cherokee, my sister drove that around for a week with only 5 cylinders. Right? One of the pistons shattered. She didn't realize that it shattered. After a week, she finally said, you know, the Jeep's been running funny for like a week. Someone want to take a look at it? The number 5 piston was gone. It was shrapnel in the bottom of the motor. We didn't need a new block. We didn't need a new head. We got the head honed. We put a new piston in it. Done. Done. You can't kill a 4.0, and that reliability, however bad on gas it might have been, and antiquated the technology, reverse flow heads are awful, I know. However ridiculous and old school they were, and I understand why they had to die, they absolutely defined that brand for that time period, and they made so many people Jeep fans. Let's talk about the economic boom of the 90s, all right? The 90s were awesome. The Clinton years, whatever else Clinton did, and whatever his politics were, and whatever his wife is doing now, doesn't matter. Because in the 90s, Clinton was doing it for the US, all right? And that meant that Jeep could make some more interesting, expensive models, and there would be people to buy them, all right? There are Grand Cherokees, specifically ZJs out there, like the Orvis model, and that's when the Upcountry started coming around, they were really, really done up. Crazy leather interiors. They had the full-length console up top. They could afford to put a little more into them because people could afford to buy the vehicles, and people were buying vehicles. They were buying new vehicles. Wranglers were flying off the shelves. Forget about Cherokees, man. Cherokees are friggin' everywhere, all right? You can't go out on a drive for more than 10 minutes in a populated area and try to not see a Cherokee. You can't do it. They are everywhere, all right? And that has a lot to do with the economic boom of the 90s. It's not like today, all right? Today, it's sketchy, and even worse in like 2008. it was hard out there, and there were a lot more people were buying used cars, probably the 90s Jeeps. And by the way, I know this time period leaks on either side from the 90s. I'm just calling it the 90s. When I say the 90s, I mean like 87 to 01, 04. Let's talk about what killed it. All right? There are a few things that killed it, that ended the golden age and put us on the path to where we are today. And that's kind of, it's not a bad place that we are today. It's a necessary conclusion. It's a logical conclusion to the momentum we had. People like me, fans of solid front axles, not super huge on where we are today, but it's good for the brand. Jeep brand is certainly going to be around forever. I talked about the economics. When the economics changed, people stopped buying new cars. There was a little downtick in gas guzzlers, which I don't think Jeeps are really gas guzzlers. I mean, it's not a Suburban with a 454, but yeah, you know, stuff like the 5.9. I mean, nobody's put a 5.9 in a Grand Cherokee ever. Well, that's actually not true. It's not even remotely true. They're putting a much better 5.9 in the Grand Cherokee now. One thing that killed it was the Chrysler merger with Mercedes-Benz. Right? For those of you that don't know, in 1998, Daimler Chrysler was created. And that was a mix of the Chrysler Corporation from the United States and Daimler, who owns Mercedes. Daimler-Benz, I think, is the parent company to Mercedes-Benz. All right? And the purpose of this merger was, see if this sounds familiar, for the American company Chrysler that was struggling a little bit in '98, not Jeep, not the Jeep brand, but the rest of the Chrysler brand, to bolster its sales with the help of a powerful, successful European car company, and for that European car company to find a way to sell more cars in the United States. Does that sound familiar? Save me like an hour of explanation. How did it end last time? Same thing happened this time, in disaster. All right, the idea was that Chryslers would make themselves look a little bit more upscale, and Mercedes would maybe appeal to the working man a little more, which has always been Chrysler's game. The opposite happened, all right? Now people think Chryslers are too upscale for the working man, and the you know, typical Mercedes owner is now associating his Mercedes with a Chrysler, and he's going to go buy a BMW instead. It did not work out for either company, and it kind of screwed up Jeeps in a really big way. Enter the WK. All right, WK Grand Cherokee started in 2005. Not a bad vehicle. Not a bad vehicle. Not a great Jeep. All right, non-serviceable transmission, courtesy of Mercedes. All right. A much more simplified 147 transfer case, no selectability, no low range, no two-wheel drive, and this weird computer-controlled stability control to go with this one-speed transfer case that is just atrocious. If you have a WK or an XK or anything else with that new, it's not new anymore, in fact, it's old. They don't use it anymore. They fixed it. But from like 05 to like 2010, if you've ever been stuck in an 05 to 2010 Grand Cherokee, Commander, maybe Liberty, Baseline, if you've ever been stuck in the snow or the mud, you know that all it does is detune the motor. When your wheels start to slip, it just detunes the motor and detunes the motor. And if your wheels keep slipping, it'll eventually just stop everything and you're not going anywhere. It is the worst. And Mercedes did that. They had us do that. They convinced Jeep to do that kind of thing because that's what the consumers want. They want a simpler Jeep. They don't want some rugged, you know, off-road thing where you have to pull your own transfer case back to get into four-wheel drive. Simplify it. Make it classier. Didn't work, all right? People who were looking at Mercedes in 2005 did not all of a sudden want a Grand Cherokee instead of whatever the Mercedes SUV is called, all right? It did not work at all. Around this time, and I don't know that this is all Mercedes, I think this is just the unfortunate wheels of progress turning, independent front suspension comes in a big way. It starts in like 2002 when the Liberty replaces the Cherokee. The first Jeep ever since the Wagoneer. In the 60s, there was a V8 Wagoneer that had independent front suspension, but it was more of a beam setup, and it does not apply to this. So for intents purposes, 2001, Liberty is the first of all, in 2001, they killed the XJ. though that alone would not be enough to end the golden age of Jeeps, though it is very sad and makes me very unhappy. They replaced the Cherokee with the Liberty. In fact, fun fact, all over the rest of the world, the Liberty is called the Cherokee. The Liberty is not its own nameplate anywhere but the United States. The Liberty was just the continuation of the XJ Cherokee. I think they're called the KK, KJ? KJ maybe, doesn't matter. Independent front suspension is not cool. I don't like it. I know a lot of people that don't like it. It's not great for off-road. Toyota guys will argue with me here. But you never see anybody with a Wrangler putting in IFS, but you see plenty of people with Toyotas trying to get their hands on Dana 35. So you figure that out. Oh, more Dana 44s. Doesn't matter. They make the Liberty... It's there. You can see, when you look at a Liberty, you can see off-road potential. It's not dripping in it, but you can see it. They were still trying to keep it alive. Then the WK replaces the WJ. Independent front suspension, non-selectable transfer case, single speed transfer case. They get rid of the 4-liter altogether. I do think that that had something to do with killing it. All in all, they changed the brand in such a way that every Jeep is not off-roadable anymore. All right? In the 90s, any Jeep you bought, unless you were dumb enough to order a 2-wheel drive Jeep, which don't do that. When I see 2-wheel drive Jeep, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? Explain yourself. We don't do that. We don't do that. Moving on. Sorry. Unless you got a 2-wheel drive Jeep, every Jeep in the 90s and before the Liberty really is off-roadable. Has plenty of off-road potential. And even the Liberty, they had the 242 Select Track in them. And then you start getting to today where a WK is not off-roadable. You need to do a lot to a WK to make it off-roadable. You need to maybe get a special package. A baseline Grand Cherokee before this could always go off-road. Maybe it had the 249, maybe it had the 242, maybe it had the 247. It could go off-road. You can't do that with Jeeps, and that is a big part of what ends the golden age of Jeeps. All right, it didn't help that the 3.7 that they brought out before the 3.6, there's nothing you can do with the 3.7. It's maxed out from factory, which is nice, but it's not super powerful. The transmissions they put behind it were super slushy and just no fun. No manual options. I guess the Liberty and the Wrangler still, but I want manual Grand Cherokees. They made them for like 3 days in '93 and then they stopped. Can we do something about that? Hey, if anybody, what's that guy's name? Maraschino something or another, the CEO of Fiat Chrysler right now? 5-speed Grand Cherokees. People will buy 5-speed Grand Cherokees. People will buy them. I will buy them. I'll buy all of them. Screw it. 5-speed Grand Cherokees. All right. This ends the golden age of Jeeps. All right. We have now converted our brand from what it was in the mid-90s, a fun brand, a brand that had something for everybody, a brand that was cheap enough that everybody could afford it, a brand that if you had a Jeep, you could have fun. Now we're a brand that makes stuff like the Compass, all right? And if you drive a Compass, I do mean to offend you because you made a bad choice. Every Compass should come with an actual compass as a symbolic gesture to help you find some direction in your life. It's basically built off the Dodge Caliber, which is another complete misfire of a car. The new ones, the new Compasses are a little better, but Jeep is still a great brand. I still love Jeep, all right? But I mean, I can't afford a new Jeep. You know, we've moved to a point where our brand is secure, and that is a good thing, all right? The Wrangler's never going away. As long as there's any one plant out there making Jeeps, that one plant will be making Wranglers, and that's cool, and I'm happy about that. Because while I'm not a Wrangler guy, I do love the Wrangler. They're too expensive, and they don't fit my purposes right now. At some point, I would like to have a Wrangler. We're making a lot of extra cars, some of them based on Fiat platforms, which is horrifying. We're trying to appeal again to the masses, but we're not doing as well as we did under Lee Iacocca. Go figure. Not everybody can be a genius like Lee Iacocca. That's what we're trying to do right now. That's why we have the Grand Cherokee and the new Cherokee and the Renegade, and they're talking, I think they released it for foreign markets, the Grand Commander, which is essentially going to be a WK2 with a third row. they're trying again to make a Jeep for everybody. They're bringing back pickups. That's cool, but I don't think they're doing it right. They're making them too expensive, and they're not adding that element of fun. They're forgetting that a Jeep is an off-road vehicle. A Jeep is, when you buy a Jeep, the promise that those 4 letters on the front of the hood make to you is, if you want to, you can go off-road. Another promise is you will not be stuck in the snow. Another promise is you will have fun in this vehicle. And I don't know that I've ridden in WK2s. It's just another car. It's not a Jeep. I've ridden in new Wranglers. They're nice, but they're huge. And the 4-door ones might as well be a Hummer. You know, seriously, the JKU, I'm not necessarily hating on it. I mean, I know most of them that you see are 4-door Wranglers now. I get the draw to that, but they're huge. You're not doing a trail riding in a JKU. To sum up what I'm getting at here is that golden age of Jeeps put our brand, well, first of all, it saved our brand. We easily could have faded away or gone to like somebody like GM. It put our brand in a position where almost every household had a Jeep, or a Jeep touched them in some way. You knew somebody with a Jeep. They were everywhere. Everybody could afford them. From parents and people, you know, on in life who could afford brand new cars to people who were buying used cars, buying their first cars. There was a Jeep for everybody in the 90s. And it helped create our brand and put our brand and create the recognition that allowed things like the merger to come in and change our brand. Now that merger ended in 2007 and it ended badly. Neither side made out on it. We all got screwed. Chrysler got screwed. Mercedes got screwed. It screwed, I think, Jeep the most as far as lasting impressions. Things like the WK2 would not have come around if not for influence from Mercedes. And I don't think that's a great thing. Honestly, I don't. I really miss independent front suspension, or a solid axle front suspension. I really like solid axles. I don't like independent front suspension. Without that golden age, yes, it's sad that it ended, but it's more important to remember that without the golden age, the 90s, 87 to 01, 04, and I say 01, 04 because it's either when the Liberty came without a solid front axle, or it's when they killed the WJ and released the WK without a solid front axle. One of those two moments is the uh-oh moment, where looking back we can say that's where it all was different from then on. You know what I mean? As soon as you could get a Jeep with, you know, an independent front suspension that was much closer to a car suspension than a truck suspension, it was all downhill from there. The important takeaway here is, yes, it's sad that the golden age ended, and we need to hold on to Jeeps like this because they're not coming back. They're never going to be around again. And when we've used all these up and we've flipped them all into puddles and we've run them all into trees and we've let them rot out, you know, sitting in the corner of our driveways, it's going to be pretty sad because they're going to be gone. And I think that there's going to come a time, sooner rather than later, where XJs, ZJs, WJs are going to be worth money. Maybe not Bronco money right away, but it's going to get there because these things are not well maintained. People do not take care of Cherokees. I'm doing it right now. I'm currently building a plow for this thing, and it's going to, ultimately, it'll probably be the death of this thing. Not this year or next year, but down the road, the stress that plowing with this Jeep puts on it will probably be the end of it. I'll tweak the frame, or just being out in the salt will rot it away, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's what a Jeep is for. At least a golden age Jeep was. Can't do that with a WK. If I had a WK, there's no chance you're plowing with that unless you happen to have the V8 model with the limited slip differentials and the selectable transfer case. But then I've paid so much for it, now I'm not going to plow with it. You know what I mean? I'm not plowing something with leather seats and DVD players, you know? It's, you know, people are always complaining about there's too wide a gap in the income in this country, and I'm not going to offer any comment on that, but there is too far a gap between Jeeps. You can have the base model, which can't do anything, or you can have the upgraded limited model, which does everything, but you paid so much for it, you don't want to do anything with it. I'm not off-roading a $70,000 vehicle, all right? And that's what some of the new Grand Cherokees are going for, all right? This podcast was mostly informational. It's something that's been buzzing around my head. It's fun to think about where we were. It's a little bit of a public service announcement, all right? If you have one of these golden age Jeeps, maybe give some thought to washing some of the salt off it in the winter, and maybe don't put those 32-inch tires on it, you know? There's something beautiful about a stock golden age Jeep. a stock WJ, a stock ZJ, a stock XJ. And I'm leaving the Wranglers out of it because everybody knows about Wranglers. You know, Wranglers are going to have their value, and there will always be somebody saving a Wrangler somewhere. I hope there's somebody saving an XJ somewhere, you know, because it's a beautiful vehicle. Same thing with the WJ, you know, same thing with the ZJ. And when they're gone, they are gone. So that's all I wanted to say for today. If you enjoyed this podcast, by all means, subscribe to the channel, like the video. I hope you found it entertaining, maybe a little educational, at least a little bit amusing. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. If you have a Golden Age Jeep, I'd love to know what you have. And I'd love to know what you're doing to it. Are you keeping it stock, as I am suggesting few of us are? Or are you doing what I'm doing and knowingly putting it in harm's way, because that's what these Jeeps were for? They were built tough enough for it. They have enough aftermarket support to make them do whatever you want. And they're cheap enough. This thing cost me $1,200. I got a plow for it for $420. And that's all I need. You know, it's all set up with it. Transfer case, wouldn't mind a limited slip, but maybe that'll come someday. All right, guys, I'm signing off. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.